Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the shop here at Markelly Farm. It is a glorious winter day. We're up into the 50s today, due to get into the 70s here in a couple days, which is pretty crazy. I'll take this winter that we've had this year anytime. But I'm super excited, and do you know why? Because I get to do a woodworking project, and I don't get to do woodworking projects that often. But we've got a bathroom renovation going on, and I have to build a custom vanity because we just cannot find one that measures up to Kelly's taste. So she has enlisted me to make her one. So stick around if you're interested in a little woodworking project. We'd love to have you. So I've always really enjoyed woodworking since I was a little kid, standing in my Uncle Jess's garage. He had the most amazing set of tools, and I was just in awe. Every time I went over there, I would stand there watching him use all those tools. Later on, I could go over and we could do projects together. I built a couple things. I built a little shadow box thing for my girlfriend in high school one time. But really enjoyed woodworking. I took it in high school because I really enjoyed it. And since then, my Uncle Jess has passed, obviously, but he handed down some tools to me, some of his tools. So I have some real good memories of here in the shop, memories of him every time I use those tools. But we're going to get after this vanity, so let's show you what we got going. Now, I usually don't splurge for cabinet grade wood, but this is some cabinet grade plywood that Kelly wanted to get for the sides of the vanity. But I'm just using regular old Douglas fir construction lumber for the other parts that we need, like the structural parts, because I like the look of this stuff, and it's much, much cheaper than buying cabinet grade oak or something like that. And it's all kiln dried, so we don't have to worry about it moving around as it dries. This is all completely dry already. So let's get with the program here. We'll figure out what we need to do first. So this is kind of a rough sketch that we did here. We've changed it up a little bit since I drew this up. Originally we were going to go with 4 drawers, but now we're going to go 2 full width drawers with a notch in the drawer for the plumbing. Originally, the drawers were going to be narrow enough for the plumbing to get through. Now you can see we've got kind of a 4-post thing going on here. Those are going to be 1.5 by 1.5. And then we've got some other structural items in here. And down here, there's going to be slats for a shelf. And then Kelly underneath here is going to put like a basket she can slide underneath with different things, I think toilet paper or whatever. But we're 24 inches wide, 23.5 inches deep. According to our vanity top that we have, we're going to be 32 inches tall. So I think the first thing we need to do is cut all of these structural members out. They're going to be 1.5 by 1.5. So we've got this Doug fir 4x4 that we also picked up. We're going to need these 32 inches long, so I'm going to cut them about 33. So we got some edges we can trim off because this saw here will splinter it out pretty good. So we'll cut them. We'll put a nice sharp blade in the table saw when we do the final trim. So we'll cut these at like 33, and then we'll set up the table saw to rip them down to our 1.5 by 1.5. Now for the next process, we're setting up our table saw to rip these 4x4s down. You need to make sure that your blade is dead on plumb. So we've got our square out and we've made our adjustment to where our saw blade is dead on. Now if you can't get it dead on, there's some little grooves down in here that the mechanism runs in, and sometimes they'll get sawdust in them and they won't let the blade get full travel. So if you find that you can't get it dead on, clean those grooves out and it'll most likely be able to get right where you need it. So our 4x4 is 3.5 inches thick. So we set our blade as high as it will go, which it won't gut through all at once. We'll have to flip it around and do 2 cuts. That's why we got to be dead on vertical. And we've set it at 1 3/4 because that's exactly 1/2 of 3.5. And we set the 1 3/4 to the center of our saw blade, so it will be dead on in the center. If we were to put 1 3/4 here, that doesn't account for the width of the saw blade. So 1 3/4 right to the center of the blade. So let's start passing these through. Now that we've got it cut in half, we'll run it through again to split it in half this way, and we should have 4 pieces. Now, because we're 1 3/4, we can still trim them down to 1.5 cutting off any undesirable sides that we don't want. Okay, we got all of our pieces cut down into 1 3/4. Now we can set our saw blade at probably 1 5/8, and we'll true them up real good. And then we'll go down to our 1.5, run them through again. That way we got a good true piece of material. For our cleanup passes, we've installed what's called a feather board. What that feather board does is as you run your piece through, it pushes on the side of your board, keeps it against the fence, so I don't need to keep my fingers over here pushing that. It's a lot safer. It doesn't allow it to back up either. So just shoves it right on through. Okay, we got all of our pieces done, run through the table saw. It took a little bit, but we got it. This is going to be our uprights, and then these will be like our 2-foot pieces, our structural pieces that go around. Now, you may wonder why we ran that so many times through the table saw. Well, I wanted to kind of surface all 4 sides, because you see this kind of texture that it left on there. I want kind of a resawn texture like that. Makes it look rustic, like old farmhouse style. And that's what we want. When we sand this, we're not going to sand that completely off. There'll be some of that left in the background and give us that kind of rustic farmhouse look. So now that we've got these surfaced and everything, we're going to go ahead and cut them to the length that we need, which these will be right on 32. So we'll look at the ends and see which ends aren't looking so hot, and we'll cut that end off as we trim them up. Okay, we're going to go back to our cutoff saw. I have a nice little stop here that I can use, so all 4 of our legs are exactly the same length. And the saw is cutting good enough where it's not splintering, so we're fine. So let's get all 4 of those cut. All right, it's time to cut these down the length, 4 of them. So front to back, we want 23.5. So these are 1.5 inch pieces, so this needs to be 3 inches shorter than 23.5. So looks like those are going to be 20.5. We've got our stop set at 20.5 from the blade. So now we can cut all 4 of those. Now for our last set, we're 24 inches wide. So 24 minus 3 is 21. So these pieces will be 21 inches. Boy, having a stop sure makes it nice. Saves a lot of measuring. So now these pieces here, we need pocket holes in those to attach to our leg pieces. So we're going to get our Craig jig out, and we'll show you how that works, drilling the pocket holes. So here's our Craig jig setup. It's got a fixture that you clamp to your wood that has holes in it that keeps your bit at the right angle. You can also set the thickness of wood, so we're dealing with 1.5 inches, so we got to move these brackets all the way out to get the right angle. And then we have to set the length of our drill bit by putting this collar on the drill bit to set how deep it goes. And we tighten it with this little Allen wrench. And then when we go to screw it together, it's got this really long driver bit that we use for the screws. There's a whole assortment of screws here. For 1.5 inch material, you have to use the 2-inch screws. That'd be these here. And you can see they have a square socket head on them, so they don't strip out like Phillips screws. So as we determine where our holes go, we'll be looking around, and if we have a side that doesn't look good, we'll put that to the inside, which means our pocket holes will be on this side, which will leave the outside piece being the most attractive. So they make setup of your bit super easy. You take your collar, put it on your drill, put your drill back in here with the pilot here in this little cup, and then it shows you, it goes by the depth or the thickness of your wood. So we're clear down here on 1.5 inches, so you just slide your collar all the way down, take your Allen screw that's provided, tighten it down on your drill bit, and you're ready to go. We've already got our other guide here clamped on, and these arms are set at 1.5 inches as well. So that drill bit goes right down into that socket. It holds it at the perfect the perfect angle and everything. We're doing it here on our welding table, which I cleaned off with some alcohol so there's no grease or anything on there. The reason I do it on the table is if we use the clamp without the table, this clamp will want to bite into the wood and leave a mark. So we've clamped it right to the table, so now all we got to do is get a drill and drill those holes. The drill bit that comes with the kit has this little slotted hex adapter, so it goes right in a driver drill, so that's cool. So you get your drill bit started in your hole here. Now you want to come in and out a few times because these bits will get clogged up and it'll stop from drilling. So keep backing in and out as you drill. But you want to go clear to the stop. There you go, our holes are drilled. So let's take our thing off there and see our perfect pocket holes there. So now all we got to do, turn this thing around, put it back on here, use our same clamp. We're centering this on the wood, just right at about 1.5 inches. Clamp it back down, feels good. So back in we go, making sure we're on the same side as our other holes. There we go, that one's done. All the way there. So we just have 3 more of these to do. Perfect little pocket holes. So the next pieces we need to cut are the plywood for the two sides, which will be this piece here and this piece here. Now the plywood is going to go on the inside, flush with the inside of this. That way when we put our drawer slides in, those will have something to attach to. So let's figure out how big these need to be. Needs to be the same width. So what did we have, 20.5 here? So it's got to be 20.5 wide. We just got to figure how long it's got to be. So we've got our piece kind of mocked up on one side. Kelly wants 6 inches from the floor to underneath this shelf right here. And that leaves us 23 3/4 inside. So we want to cut our piece of plywood 20.5 by 23 3/4, and then that's going to set right inside of that. But I want to get those cut before we start attaching these. So if they're just a bit of gap, we can take that up by just sliding this piece over just a hair. So this is a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and for one person, it's quite a chore to put that on the table saw and cut. So I've got my straight edge clamp here that we're going to use with our little circular saw. What we're going to do is we're going to cut our 20.5 wide right here. And then we can get 2 pieces at 22 3/4 right here. I may have said 23 3/4 in the previous clip, but it's actually 22 3/4. So we'll cut this, and then we can get 2 pieces out of it, and I'm not handling it, but I will cut this a little wide. So we'll cut our actual measurements when we get ready on the table saw, so we can square this thing up really nice. So we'll cut it like at 21, and we can square the rest up later. So Kelly's out here helping. Whenever you cut plywood with a circular saw, it cuts from the bottom. So you want the good side underneath. So if there's any tear out, the tear out is on the top. So we've got our straight edge clamp on here. There's a 1-inch setback, so we had to add an inch for this measurement where this goes. This is where our cut's going to be right here. So as I go across, I've got our blade shortened up to where it's just barely going through the plywood. Kelly's going to hold this end up. All right, thank you, baby.
That's it?
That is all. Okay, we got our piece cut off now. We can do the rest over here on the table saw. We've cut it long, so what I want to do is set our table saw up a little bit long still. We'll cut one side off, smooth it up real nice, and then we'll come down to our perfect 20.5, flip it around, cut the other side off so we're perfectly parallel. Now, to avoid any tear out, we want to take our saw blade, run it down to where we're just barely coming out of the wood. And then also remember, on a table saw we're cutting down now, so we want the good side up, so we're cutting down from the good side, so any tear out is on the back side. Okay, we've got our board exactly the width we need it. So now we need to do the height. This is a 4-foot board, so we have extra. So what I'm going to do is mark dead center, and then we'll use our little skill saw to buzz it down the center, and then we will true it up on the table saw, because our one piece will be a lot easier to maneuver than both of these at the same time. So I've checked on our cut edges that we did last time on the table saw, and this is perfectly square with these corners. So all we have to do is cut the edge that we need to true up right here. So I've got our saw set at 22 3/4. I double checked the measurement on my paper. So just got to send these 2 pieces through and they will be done. So before we do primary assembly, we've got a bunch of sanding to do. We're going to use our little cordless sander here with our Velcro sandpaper. We bought a whole new package of that today. So we're going to take all the burrs off of everything. Remember, we're going to leave just a little bit of texture on here. We'll knock the corners off just a little bit so they're not sharp. So we'll see you in a bit. Well, after about an hour's worth of sanding, we've got everything sanded down. We've got the corners softened a little bit. Hopefully I didn't sand too much to where I sanded the character out of it. But we're going to save some of this fine sawdust here in case we need to make some homemade wood filler at some point. And this will match our project here. So I think we're at a point where we can start doing a little bit of assembly. Okay, we're using our factory corner on our plywood to get everything clamped together. We've got the panel just sitting in here. Eventually it's going to come up flush with the surface here. But we want to get the framework secured first, and then we'll start working on the panel. We've got the corners all clamped so nothing can move around. Remember, we're using our 2.5-inch pocket screws for 1.5 inch material. And these are square drive bit, so it won't slip around a lot. So you can feel it stuck up tight once you get it tight. Okay, we got our side all put together, so now we've got to get some pocket screws put in this plywood. That'll hold the plywood into our side. So we made a reference mark, so when we pull this out, it'll go back in the exact same way. So we'll pull it out, get our pockets drilled. Okay, our panel's all screwed in nice and tight. Let's flip it over and see what it looks like. There it is. Looks pretty snazzy. Nice and tight all the way around. Okay, the last one worked out so well that I went ahead and put the pocket holes in this plywood ahead of time because we won't have to take it back out. Got this thing squared back up. We'll start putting screws in it. Okay, we got 2 panels looking real good now. So now we can attempt to put these all together with these other cross members. Okay, our cabinet is put together. It's quite a chore getting those other ones in, but we clamped them and got them in. So what is left now is we have our slats that we're going to put here in the bottom. We're probably going to put a piece across the middle here for support. And then we have to put our drawer slides and make our drawers that go in here. And then we may even cut a piece to go in the top to make it a little more rigid, because we're rigid this way, but we're not so rigid this way. So we might cut a piece of plywood to go in the top up here. So it's getting late, as you might be able to see there. So time to go in for supper. We'll get back on this thing tomorrow. Well, good morning, folks. It's 5 a.m. here in central Nebraska, 22 degrees outside. So we're up early this morning, which we always are, but we actually came outside. I want to get a jump start on our vanity we're making. So I've got a ton of wood here in the wood stove heating up the shop. We'll get her up to about 40 degrees in here, and then we'll get going. Got our coffee going this morning. So we're looking forward to getting back on this thing. Looking this cabinet over this morning, I don't think we need to add any rigidity to it. I think it's plenty rigid the way it is. And it's perfectly square. So that's cool. So I think we can start working on the drawers. So we're going to get this plywood, get it in the table saw, and we'll start making our drawers. So with our cabinet, we have these drawer slides that we're going to use. I really like these because they kind of wrap underneath the drawers, kind of support the drawer, and they're very easy to install. So for these drawer slides, you have to allow a 1/2 inch on both sides. So our drawer needs to be 1 inch narrower exactly than our total width here. And we probably should add about a 1/16 to that, just to be sure that we've got enough room, because we don't want to be super tight in here with our drawers. So we'll go about 1 1/16 narrower than our cabinet. So we've got our big piece of plywood over here. We've got to cut out our drawer bottom, and then our drawer bottom has to have a notch, because in the back and coming down from the top, we have plumbing coming down our trap that goes to the wall for the drain. So our drawer is going to have a U-shaped notch in it to allow for that trap. So we'll get all that figured out. This width and this depth is easy to figure out, and then we'll calculate how big our trap cutout needs to be. All right, I've gone inside and got some measurements. This is looking at the wall and the floor and the side wall. So our drain is 18 inches up from the floor. It's 13 inches over, which is 1 inch from being centered in our cabinet. So we'll have to allow a little bit more for the cutout here, just to compensate for it not being in the center. So instead of a 4-inch cutout, we're going to do a 6-inch cutout, so we got plenty of room. Now our downspout from our bowl, to allow enough clearance around everything, we need to go 13 inches from the back wall to the back side of this cutout here. So we'll have to allow for our thickness of wood there. And then here's our hot and cold water, which we clear. The cabinet comes like up here, so we're going to clear that just fine. So let's start making our drawers. We have this measurement now, the 13, and we have the 6, so we've got our cutout. So let's figure our length, which I'm pretty sure is going to be 23.5, but I'll check. And then we need to be 1 1/16 inch narrower here, so let's get those measurements. So our inside measurement of our cabinet, the width is 20 15/16. That's the rough opening in the front and the back. So 1 1/16 inch less than that is 19 7/8. This should have been pretty even number, but a 1/16 off is no big deal when you're dealing with this kind of stuff. So 19 7/8 wide on our drawer. Our cabinet is 23.5 deep, so we're just going to go 23 to allow a 1/2 inch play on the back side of that drawer. Now this is 3/4 plywood, and unlike your construction grade plywood, your cabinet grade plywood is exactly 3/4 of an inch. They don't short you on cabinet grade plywood, so you can see we're exactly 3/4 of an inch there on our plywood. So we'll allow 3/4 of an inch play all the way around for the thickness of the material, because the bottom side of our drawer is going to be minus the thickness of material all the way around. So we'll figure out what those measurements are for our drawer bottom, and we'll get our drawer bottom cut. Now I just thought of something on our cutout for our drawer. This is a P-trap that goes underneath the sink. Our drain that comes out of the wall is about 18 inches up, which is still well below the drawer. And because it's off center, remember we made that cutout wider. But I just thought about, all we got to do is turn that trap to be right dead in the center of the drawer again. This piece here can be adjusted any length we need coming out of that drain. So we can go dead center with our trap very easily. So we're going to cut our cutout back down to 4 inches to save space in that drawer. Now for our drawer bottom, we're going to use this corner of the wood over here because it's got some discoloration. and it won't matter because the drawer bottom is going to be lined. Kelly's going to line them, so you won't see that. We'll keep our pristine wood over here for better purposes. So I'm going to cut this wider than we need, obviously, and we'll use this factory edge as a straight edge when we run it through the table saw to get a nice edge here. And then, like I said, we'll get 2 drawer bottoms out of this one piece we cut off with a skill saw. Now, a good hack when you're by yourself cutting a piece of plywood like this, get your cut started and then get you a piece of wood and clamp on this edge to hold this side up. And then when you get to the other end, all you got to do is kind of support that end once you cut through the end. All right, we've got our piece squared up and then we've got it cut in half so we can start whittling these pieces down by just moving our fence in where it's needed. We'll get our overall measurement and then we'll cut our slot. So we've got our fence set up at 21.5. Now these older saws, they got kind of a rickety fence here. So you need to measure front and back of the blade when you're measuring to your fence. The newer, higher end models, very expensive models, have a nice wide fence and they don't move. They're zeroed in, so you don't have to do that. But I bought this table saw when I was right out of high school. It's the old Craftsman with a good heavy deck. Now they're all stamped out metal decks and they're not flat. This one's perfectly flat, so it's nice. And then your saw blades, if you look at the teeth on them, one tooth will be turned one way, the next tooth will be kind of turned the other way. So you always want to measure to the tooth that is turned this direction because that's going to be the widest point on this side. So front and back, get a good measurement, lock it down, and then measure it again to make sure you're still dead on. Got our 2 bottoms cut with our overall rough measurement, so now we need to start thinking about our notch. So for our notch, we need to cut 5.5 inch wide to allow for this thickness of material here. So we'll lay that out on here, and then we'll get our 13 inches deep. Some of this we can do on the table saw by setting the fence. We can get a nice straight cut. We can't cut all the way there, but we can finish the rest with a hand saw. The crossways one like this we'll probably have to plunge cut with our circular saw, which is going to tear up a little wood. Maybe we could find a different method, but maybe we'll be able to drill some holes maybe and use the saber saw maybe, but it's kind of hard to get straight, but we'll try. Now we'll just finish out this cut with the saw, with our hand saw. Get it down in there. Now for our cross cut, we've got our board turned upside down. We're going to attempt to do a plunge cut with our circular saw. So we'll just tilt the saw up like this, pull this guard back, and then eyeball down that line and try to get a perfect plunge cut down there. We'll start a little short just to make sure, and then we'll kind of move over and trim it up. I'm going to set our saw as deep as it'll go so I can cut further across, and then I'll get fairly close, and then we'll have to finish this with the handsaw also. All right, that wasn't terribly difficult. So now we need to start cutting our edge pieces. We need to determine how tall we want our drawers. I'm thinking we want our drawers about 4 inches deep. So they would need to be, the sides would need to be 4 and 3/4 inches to give us a 4-inch drawer. But we'll confirm with Kelly that's what she wants. And then we can start cutting our side pieces. All we got to do, set our fence at 4 3/4, take some more of our plywood and run it through a few times. We want to run it this way so our grain is going long ways. All right, I confirmed with my sweet wife, 4 inches is perfect for the drawer. So we got to get our table saw set up at 4 3/4 inches, and we'll start buzzing some more of this plywood. Okay, I believe we've got plenty cut here. That leaves us a fairly good piece of drop there for other projects. Now for cross-cutting our pieces, we're going to use our little miter gauge here. You want to make sure it's dead on square with your blade, and we are. Now another thing you can do to help you is you see these notches in your miter gauge. You can get you a longer board and put here on edge, put a couple screws in there, and that'll help hold your board a little straighter instead of just relying on this little narrow piece here. But I think we're going to be good just to go with this. We've got a brand new blade that we put in there. We're going to be cutting real clean, so everything's going to be working out real well. Our first piece we'll cut for the drawer is this piece here, so 5.5 inches. We'll get that cut. Got our little bonus pieces here we did. We can get both pieces out of just one of these boards. So we'll true up one edge, and then we'll flip it around and start making our cuts. All right, perfect fit. So we'll cut the one for the other drawer, and then we'll start piecing in these. We've set up a little mock-up table here, so as we cut our pieces, we can trim them as needed and get them fit perfectly. So we'll just keep going on around these things. Perfect. Okay, we've got the back sides of our drawers boxed in. Now before we measure for our side pieces, we want to put our front piece together first, because the big mistake that a lot of people make is they'll stop their side piece right here and put their front piece on like this, flat. So it's a lot stronger if you run your side pieces past and put screws or nails through this way, because your strength is a lot better than it would be if you were just to butt that piece on the front, because it's being pulled on all the time. So eventually stuff can work loose and you'll pull the front off of your drawer. But if you run your side piece past and pin it, screw it, nail it this direction, it's a lot less likely to pull loose. Now that we have our front piece dead on, now is the time we can measure our side piece. Our drawers are all framed up. Everything's cut just absolutely spot on perfect. So we've got a lot of sanding to do before we can start assembling these. And then it'll probably be lunchtime by then. So I'll come back when we're starting to put these babies together. We'll do the assembly here on the table saw, because this is a perfectly flat surface. Now sometimes what I do to break up a monotonous task is I'll stop, like right now I've got one of these drawers sanded, so I'm going to go ahead and put it together. That way it breaks it up and I'm not sanding for like an hour and a half straight. But before I get too carried away, let's go check something. So we brought our bottom and our sides over to make sure that everything's going to be fitting in here fine and not super tight. And we are absolutely perfect with that 1/16 of an inch that we built in. So we can take off with this thing. Also, while I was sanding, I kept everything indexed correctly on here because it's kind of a custom fit, so you don't want to get things out of order. Now we're kind of putting things together in the same order that we cut them, and then as we go, we're kind of putting our best foot forward, so to speak, making sure the best surfaces are showing all the way around. And if there's like a void in the plywood, we make sure that's on the bottom. I didn't spend a lot of time sanding the edges because we're going to come around once we're done and sand all those flush nicely and touch them all up. All right, ladies and gents, there's our beautiful little drawer. We softened all the edges so nothing's going to snag on this. Now, I may have left some of you wondering why I would do this to the front of the drawer. It would look better if this outer piece was on the outside, but there's going to be a face piece over the top of this, so these edges will not show. And like I said, it's a lot better that these are nailed in sideways because they're less likely to come off. So I'm going to go throw this over in the cabinet. We can jump on this. We've already had lunch. Kelly brought me out some food, so we can jump right on this one, get this one together, and then we can start putting the finish on this thing. Okay, both of our drawers are done. So now we need to make the faces for these drawers. They need to be 22 inches wide, which is 2 inches wider than the drawer, so it overlaps the side a little bit. And then we need to make them about 5.5 inches tall. And we need 2 of them. We've got these 2 1x12s here that we're going to use to make our drawer faces. We'll just set up our table saw and knock them out. Get our drawer fronts made. They're going to be flush with the drawer on the bottom, overlapping the top and the side. 1 1/16 on either side. We just have to center it. We've got it clamped. So we're going to screw this from the back. And then eventually our drawer pulls are going to go all the way through. They're going to be bolted through, sandwiching these 2 pieces together. So I'm going to pre-drill that back there, and we'll get some 1 1/4 screws in there so they don't poke through the front. And then we'll do the other one. All right, got our drawer front fastened. Just got to do the other one. Okay, now we're going to fasten the portion of the drawer slide that goes on the drawer. The wheel goes to the rear, and then the front we'll just put all the way up against that. So we just got to put a few screws in there and then do the one on the other side, and then this portion is done. Drawer slides are on, both drawers. I only put a couple screws because these are going to come back off when we stain, and I use an oddball hole. We're actually going to use these tapered holes here when we put them on permanent. So now we have to go put the other half of the slides in our cabinet so we can dry fit our drawers. Okay, we've measured 5 inches down from this point to the inside bottom of this track right here on both sides. So our drawer should slide right in there, and we should have the same hangover all the way around the side. Okay, our top drawer is in. Opens up. Comes out almost full width. You don't want to put a lot of weight on it way out there though. Pretty neat. That's about as far as we'll have to open it probably. So now we got to figure out where to put this other one because we got to get the gap right here. Both drawers are now in. There they are. They'll look different with the handles on them. We left about a 1/4 inch gap between the two drawers. I think that'll work good. So now we need to make the slats for the bottom. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these 2x4s. We're going to rip them vertically to get 2 3/4 inch pieces that are 3.5 inch wide. And then we'll figure out how many we need in there. Okay, we got the slats made. They're not fastened yet. I got to check with Kelly, see if these gaps are too wide. She said she wanted 1/2 inch, but if we go down to 1/2 inch, we're going to have to rip all these boards and add a 6th board. Alrighty then. That's our vanity right there. Check with Kelly. She's okay with these spacings. I guess the only thing going down here is towels. So that'll work. You can see our drawers up here. We have a onyx top that's going on this after it's all finished. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll show you a picture of this with the first coat of finish on it and the stain. But it was a fun project, a couple-day project, and we're gonna probably spend a couple days putting sealer and stain on this thing. Now the only thing left to do that I won't bore you with is there's 4 pocket holes that you're going to be able to see. And we have these pocket hole plugs. So we'll glue these in here like this on these 4 holes here in the front. And then once the glue dries, we will sand those down so you won't be able to see those pockets. But I'm quite pleased with our vanity. Kelly likes it too. Now normally this is all wasted space up here because most of your vanities have one false drawer here on the top, probably this big, and then there's 2 cupboard doors, and that's the only storage area that you get. But with what we did here, we've got 2 full drawers that we can put stuff in. Plenty of storage space in our new bathroom. Hope you enjoyed the project as much as I did. It's fun getting back in the wood shop here and getting a project going. Got a couple other wood projects I'm going to do while I've got everything stringed out. But come back and see us. We've got more of what we're doing here on the farm, and we enjoy having you. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us on the farm. There it is, all done, ready to go be installed in the bathroom.